All right, we're live. Okay, I called to order the meeting of the PZC Regulatory Review Committee of May 15th at 5:05 PM. And members present are Corsi, Taco, Butch, and Ward. And we have minutes from April 23rd.
I move we accept them as presented.
Moved by Ward,
Which will second?
second, all in favor?
I wasn't here, so I abstained.
Okay, one abstention, 3 yes. And we're here today to talk about planned housing design district. And we have our trustworthy consultants with us in force to talk about this very simple subject.
Very simple.
You know, I actually think our multifamily regulations right now are not very simple, and I think this
Are not, what did you say?
Simple.
So
they're very,
They're
very
very complicated.
complicated, yeah.
Anything would be better.
Well,
Well,
Yeah,
I
don't
wouldn't
say
say that they're
that.
bad. I would say that they're very nuanced. Well, it takes a lot to apply for something. But I think the result we've gotten have been, I mean, people may not like the density, that could switch. They may not like the density bonuses, that could switch. But I think we got what our regulations said. It's just, it takes a lot for a developer to do this. I think these are simple and elegant, and I think it's really hard, and it's taken me a while to get there. But we were talking about this, what is going to be, in my opinion, as staff, what's going to be great about these is that it will allow the commission a lot of discretion. What's going to be bad about these is that it's going to allow the commission a lot of discretion. And so that's going to be challenging. And I mean, these guys work all over the state, but my sense is that this is going to be a little bit of a pivot for a developer to come in, and because they want to know, they want the cookbook, no matter how complicated the recipe is, they have an attorney, they can follow that cookbook. They're going to have to really like go to the creative writing pad, which is, they're going to have to really understand our community. They're going to have to understand what good design is. They're going to have to really listen to the commission and kind of figure out what happens. And then in return, you guys are going to have to really delve in deep and try to understand these regulations. Do you think that's fair and a fair assessment?
I do. I would put an asterisk next to the perspective on the developer, only because I think that it allows them to mitigate their risk and exposure into segments. So they're not spending $175,000 on a design package to then hope for the next 18 months that they're going to get an approval. So they interact with the town, they get feedback, they invest a certain amount of resources, they then get a green light, so then they spend another set of resources. And so it allows them to manage the risk rather than committing a significant
Right, we
amount of time.
want to reject it very quickly if it's definitely not something we want.
That concept plan is not a significant lift on the design standpoint. So if they come in with a concept plan and the commission's like, absolutely not, then they know from there, they haven't committed all that time and energy. So it allows them to build that risk as they go. So I don't think that will be seen as a negative for them.
Yeah,
So
that'll be helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
have you implemented this in other towns?
Special development districts? Yeah, I think, I mean, there's been several that I've written and implemented, and I think the same goes for Robin.
Yeah.
And some of
Any
the
idea how
feedback,
they work?
yeah, and
Whether-
some of the feedback from developers has been, we like that we know what our risk is at each step.
Okay,
Traditional special permit, we
right.
don't know, and yeah, the large scale commercial projects that require design and survey and geotechnical and all those things in legal, they're investing
So
hundreds of thousands
yeah.
of dollars to come before you. And so at this point, they're not doing all of that up front. They're getting to like sharpen the pencil every time.
Right.
And so it's a little bit easier for them rather than just essentially
And the-
crossing your fingers.
Any,
And a lot of good developers are familiar with how the development districts work. And so to your point, they are gonna do their homework. They're gonna be doing a lot of talking with staff to say, what is it that you wanna see? And again, the beauty of it is it can be site specific. That's why it's written the way it is. So you can give them the feedback based on the parcel they're looking at.
Yeah.
And so I guess it puts a little bit more pressure on, say, staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission, because you guys really need to voice what your preferences are in those early stages, so that as they're moving along, they're, developing and designing based on that feedback from you.
Right.
what's feedback been from the town side, from the commissions or from planning development people or planning?
So I know like the Planning and Zoning Commission and one of the towns that I worked in, they like it because it gives you a lot of opportunity to, again, give the feedback based on the site specificness of it. But also you pretty much have the utmost authority to just be like, we don't like it. And you don't have to give any other reason then,
Right.
we don't like it. So, and that's not something that's really gonna be like they can't appeal it and win on that because of the way this is set up. Once you approve the master plan, and
Then
they
you're-
come back
then
with the
you're
site
committed.
plan, then you're committed. But getting to the master plan and that approval, you guys can pretty much for any reason say, we just don't like this development and we don't think it's appropriate, and they're done.
Yeah.
What I do hope is that it allows us to flex our muscle a little more.
Yes.
And for example, the thing that really sticks in my craw is that huge apartment warehouse on the corner of Cedar Swamp and Middle Turnpike. And we asked them to change that. And we were at the very end and we didn't. And all they did was make it worse by some dumb gray color or something.
Yeah, they just changed the
And
So,
color.
yeah, we could have,
And they just sort of stuck it in our face, take it or leave it.
and we could have rejected that
We
early
should have
on.
rejected it
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Well, we
what
learned our
they-
lesson on that, I
And the
think.
other lesson we learned, and this is to your point of the three or six unit multifamily. You had talked about saving space and putting it right up to the street. There isn't anybody that's spoken to me about the standard that doesn't remark about how huge it is, how right up to the street it is. And I know it was done to get as many bedrooms in as they could. And I know they put that 5-level garage right on the edge of the wetlands buffer, which I don't think should have been. And had we maybe had a discussion, well, we did have a discussion, it was just ignored, but it just feels like we should have flexed our muscle more on those points.
Yeah.
I think it's important to the townspeople that whatever development we put in looks nice. And I know by looking nice, you probably take away space that could be utilized in more development, but I kind of think we could take it back a step a little, just not overdeveloped as
And that
it feels
may,
like.
it may look better once it gets the vegetation in.
How much vegetation is there gonna be between the building and the
Well,
road
something.
though? There-
Right now, it's nothing.
Right,
I'll look
they'll-
at those plans and tell you all to give.
You can see the renderings on.
I know,
on
but
the-
it is so much closer to the road than,
Than we
was-
thought.
yeah.
To my.
and they were, talked about a streetscape with sidewalks and
Right.
trees, and I'm thinking, how is that,
And
any
then,
of that
and
gonna
then
fit?
the entrance isn't anywhere as grand as I thought it was gonna be, and then the lesser entrance is seems narrow as well, once you get those buildings up.
Yeah, I
you know?
can't-
Well, this helps us to understand what it is we want
Well,
in the
that's
future. Yeah,
what I want, yeah.
yeah.
I should have commissioned. that, but I would-
And we kind of talked about this when we started and recommended this approach, is that every time you approve an application, you'll learn. And every time you approve an application, you should get more focused on what you want for
Right.
the next one.
Yeah,
Exactly, we
Because-
just had them all come tumbling in, and we were just
It's
wondering.
successive approximations.
So you have the ability to continue to learn on the fly with this type of reg, whereas with others,
You
you
would-
continually be having to update the design standard
right.
or a zoning regulation. You can't approve a development, do a zoning amendment, and then have another one, do a zoning amendment. So this will allow you to really adjust on the fly and be much more nimble to either what the community is saying, what the development market is bringing to you. you know, what we allow and what we prefer in designs now is different than what it was 10 years ago. And so, you know, we've talked about design standards and all of those things are based upon assumptions. And then they are almost immediately out of date because things change. And so we're keeping this in the way that it's written so that you don't have to constantly rely upon a document that was written at some point in time and then becomes old. You will grow with what all these other things kind of bring to you.
Now, since we do have a lot of discretion on this, maybe we don't need to be so specific on citing criteria. Is that someplace where we could have more discretion?
Well, I think it's the part of the public trust, right? I mean, I think the public, when they move into a neighborhood, in my opinion, I mean, commissions change. And I think that it's part of the public trust that they should understand kind of a little bit.
And I was thinking, so what if a 6-unit building went in right next to me
Right,
in an area,
and that it's allowed, I'm not gonna buy there.
right? I
Right.
think that has to do with
I
the
think
public
that was
trust.
the
I
shock
think.
to Timber Drive, that all of a sudden.
No, but I mean,
there's-
even if there were a 2-acre lot, if there were an acre lot next to me that was open. And somebody said, oh, let me put a 6-unit building there, I would not be happy with that.
Mhm.
No one would be.
So that's,
Yeah, and
that's the hard part of this is the citing rules.
Thought of mine is that it is probably unwise to throw wide the window of reducing our rules for even assisting citing when we are simultaneously reducing the rules for what does it need to look like other than liking us? Because at a certain point, you've got to assume someone's going to appeal and say, this is tyranny, because I can put it anywhere if they like it, and I can do anything I want if they like it, but there's no guidelines on what they like except showing up and asking, what do you like? Tell me, and say, well, we won't design your project. Show us what we like.
Yeah.
And so, you know, at a certain point, right, it's like dance for me, developer, and
Right.
that's gotta be appealable. So there's gotta
So
be
if
something to assist.
So if we're a zoning commission, we really do have to decide the zones.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the hard,
We have
that's
to
the
do
hard work.
zoning.
I think the citing criteria is probably the most crucial piece of this.
Yes.
To Jen's point, I think people want to know what the possibility is that's going to go next to them. And, you know,
And one way to reduce that would be it has to have sewer and water, which is not on your street.
Right,
That will eliminate a lot of
We're kind of
sensitive
running
areas.
out of spots.
I would say, but that produced a whole 3 parcels.
I was,
don't
so
think
you
that's-
looked at that,
Well, town
right?
hall.
Yeah, so I don't
Where-
think that's a feasible sort of citing criteria, because
But that's an example of something
That
that could
is.
use to,
It
it
is.
could be sewer or water. That would increase it.
And then it would be private, whatever it wasn't, right?
Mhm.
They'd have to do the.
Yeah, they have to do
sewer.
well or septic, yeah.
So there were 3 you looked at that and came up with 3 parcels?
We have that tool that we built, which allows you to plug in, you know, parameters, minimum, maximum
Yeah.
parcel size, you know, and it'll pull it up. We were looking at it just before, so I don't know how many we came up with for that.
Right?
for
Two.
between-
Two.
What They,
One
the
being
two
the town
parcels are the
hall.
town hall and the Greek church.
That was
So
between
if-
3 and 5 acres. though. I
Right,
think there
it was a narrow
Well,
window.
I
but
think
even
the
so.
water issue, it presents a little bit of an issue because we don't have a clear understanding of every single Connecticut water customer.
Right.
Where sewer,
It's more clear.
it's more clear, right, on the,
There aren't any
It's
parcels
based
in the
upon the
southern.
service area information that we got from engineering, so.
It's based on your GIS
Yeah.
layer and how your GIS layer is connected as far as sewer and water to a parcel.
So was that
ID?
both sewer and
So-
water, that there were 2 parcels?
The 2 parcels, I think, was just between 3 and 5 acres.
Okay,
And water and sewer.
okay.
So that was like,
But if you just look at where the sewer goes, you could conceivably
Can I look at
construct
that?
a parcel.
Craig, do you want me to hold that up to the screen at some point?
so this, just so we are clear, this pink area is the sewer service area, right?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the things that would be helpful for me is to really understand what we get from limiting it to water and sewer, because 75% of the towns in Connecticut don't ever even get to contemplate having these types of housing developments on water and sewer. So if the purpose of tagging it to water and sewer is simply to limit how many we might have, we can do that in other ways. If we fundamentally believe that these projects are not feasible unless they have access to water and sewer because they shouldn't be on well and septic, then that's fine. But I don't want to just put that as a siting criteria simply because it reduces the total universe of developable parcels. I think we should try to do a little bit more work in that area.
No, I
Only because-
agree, I agree. We need to do more work. So it could be sewer and water plus an area that doesn't have sewer and water, but it would need more land.
Well,
That-
so that's, I think we can't focus in on that because they have to prove to us they can either get public water and sewer, or they could go to the health department and get a septic system. They could go to deep and get a community septic
There's
system.
separating distances for sewer and water, for septic and water anyway. So
Right.
it's going to just by design of the public health code require more land.
Yeah.
Think about one of our naturally occurring affordable housing developments in town is the White Oak Apartments, which Jillian and I have spent an awful lot of time. The White Oak Apartments over on
Oh, and they have their own manufactured
Right, so-
sewer system.
Right, the
Well, I don't know
manufacturer, and
what
that
this-
has gone in now, and the septic system had to go onto town land, because when that was cited, there was insufficient space for them to need to redo everything, but with modern codes and review, that situation would be avoided, and such a development would need to have that septic system and reserve area to be able to do that, and inherently would take up a large amount of space.
So
So how
is there a way we could have sewer and water plus another group of things which would need much more land to be able to do
So
it?
expand
Doesn't it kind
siting
of-
criteria for non-water and sewer parcels.
Yeah,
Are we still talking about
I think the-
arterial roads?
The
Yes,
point, the
yes.
point Jen is making, I
Arterial or
think,
collector.
is that you almost don't need to say that, because if you don't have access to sewer and water, you're not building anything unless you have more land. It's just not zoning that controls it.
Right.
It's
Like, it's none of our business.
health.
They're
So
not
like
have
we-
water, so it is, they have to prove that they have it, but how they get it is
Right.
up
So
to them.
that sort of automatically takes care of itself.
Yeah,
We don't
It
need
does.
to,
I mean,
yeah,
I just did a big zone change in one of my other towns and we reduced, they had 2 acre zoning everywhere and we reduced it and I got them down to 1/4 acre and 1/2 acre and 1 acre lots because I said, you just let the soils dictate what they can do. And if they can build on 1/2 an acre
That's what we
and
were
they.
talking about
can-
at the last meeting.
Language
And
Take a
they-
photocopy of that.
Yeah, that I-
And they can fit a well and a septic within the parameters of the public health code, then why shouldn't they be able to build
Mine did.
their house there?
Exactly, exactly.
And so they did pass it. I'm happy to say they were like, that makes total sense, and we were able to successfully do that. So I think
So the
You don't-
multifamily could be the same way.
the multifamily
If you
can be the
can
same
solve the
way.
sewer and water
you
problem.
solve that.
And so-
Prove to us that you.
Solve
can
it with
solve it.
science.
Well, so
and-
for the
Right.
for the infill reg, the under 6 and under, we have 2 conceptual site layouts that show developments on parcels that are located here, both on septic. One is a little bit more, leans a little bit more into the site use or site design. One leans a little bit more in sort of just how many units can we get on here? But we have those and we want to share them with you so you can see if we use this infill reg as written now and the parcels have septic, what would this look like?
Yeah,
How would we
that'd be-
set it? It was set up by,
That's the infill one, right?
right.
Not the multi that we
Well,
did today.
that's the carrot. If you get the PhD into a place where we can refer to Prague, then we'll go
Then
and
you
look
get
at
to
that
see the
stuff.
infill one.
But we've got to get,
We're holding it
Oh, you don't get your district.
you don't get your theory tool, you don't get your layout, yeah. We've got, and so the other thing just to keep in mind is that we can always increase how restrictive some of these criteria are through the hearing process, but we can't make it obviously more expansive. So we got to get this to a point where we can refer it. And so we should look at those high points and say, okay, maybe I want it to be 5, or maybe I want it to be 4, or maybe I want it to be 3. But as long as we're good that it won't be more, we should get this to a point where we can refer it.
So I think for the citing criteria, just taking in everything I'm hearing, we took out the minimum district size. So let me just throw this out on the floor, because would you rather see, just for a sense of comfort, a minimum district size back in 2 acres?
Yes, yes.
Oh, you would? I thought you were.
But I didn't like 10 acres.
Okay,
No,
I thought you wanted no
Uh,
size.
Well,
was-
it's,
it was
when it was
five,
10 or
yeah,
none,
right.
I like none, but I
Okay.
like two.
Yeah, I
like
don't,
two.
I don't want smaller than 2.
It's two a comfortable number.
Correct?
That's a hectare.
So then what does that do to the reason, what was your reasoning? I thought you did 3.
We had 5.
We mirrored anything we could from the existing
Right.
language.
Yeah.
In the existing regs.
So we took 5 was a median between all of the zoning districts that you guys currently have in your regs and what your minimum district sizes were. We took a look and some had 8.7 or
How
I don't
about,
know,
how
some
about 2
craziness.
buildable? 2 buildable, because that'll be more than 2.
Doesn't.
What
count
about
ones.
3 is what I was thinking, because that gets you,
Buildable?
well, you
That
have
could
to
be-
apply
Well,
it.
your units are gonna be based on
On
the
buildable.
developable acreage,
Right.
so.
We should just talk buildable.
No, I think you need to, someone comes in,
Yes.
I own 5 acres, right? So in order to land that zone,
Mhm.
I need the 2, 3, whatever acres, right?
Right.
5 acres. My land is half wetlands, a lot of steep slopes. What that does do though, is it offers neighbors buffers. It does things
Right.
like that. It makes
Yeah.
it appear less dense.
Yeah.
So, but I only have 2 developable acres, which means I can only, depending on the zone, I can only get between 30 and 10 units. Right,
The other
depending
thing
on
that
the-
I liked about 5 is that it's more than 2 building lots. So it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
just 2 building lots next to each other, let's combine them, and now I'm eligible.
I
So
think
why,
that,
why 2 building lots?
Because your minimum lot size is 90.
Don't forget about the 90. Mansfield was not done with 90. It was done with 40s.
but
But that's
it
what's on the
currently
books
is.
now.
that's
And
what it
so-
is now.
So if someone has,
That's not what the lots are now.
but it's just, in my mind, creating a distinction between what your standards are for a building lot today and not creating a situation where someone has 2 building lots that they could simply merge to meet this criteria. So if they have less, that's fine, but it gets them to a point where they need more than 2 compliant lots. And it, I think, also creates a better distinction between the 0 to 6. Ultimately,
If you think about your street that you live on, Paul,
Yeah.
right, those are generally about 40,000 square feet, 1 acre-ish
No,
lots.
20.
They're about 20?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you would need to buy up, if it's 2 acres, you'd need to buy up 4 to 5 lots,
Yeah.
on that stretch in order to get
Right.
it. You can basically prevent that area, if we want it to stay 20,000 square foot development, single family or duplex homes or infill or whatever. We don't want it to risk that. You can set it at 3 or 4, and
Right.
then it's, well, there's no way someone's gonna buy up 20 consecutive
Right.
parcels, right? The odds of that happening are just so astronomically low.
So but we do need to consider those very few places in town where they actually do have 90,000 square foot lots. There are very few, but there are some.
But those are all the way out in the far eastern end of
And they're not gonna
town.
have the sewer and water.
And then they have to prove all of that their soils work, and then they are also going to need to prove that the design works for the community area. And that's gonna be hard to do if you wanna put a bunch of developments in
I have a-
next to.
So you're talking about farmland areas?
So I think,
No,
can we think about, I just had this before I forget this. So we're talking about the amount of land you need to land the zone.
Right,
So in the SERHO, I don't think you need a minimum.
not now. no.
Not, and I don't know that we needed a minimum now. In the PV zones, you don't need a minimum now. Do we need one now? Probably not. In, now, the PVRA,
10 acres.
maybe you might want a minimum to land that zone in the PVRA and in others. I think you
I
might.
think we do.
I do too. I think that's part of the,
10 seems like too.
10 is what you have now. I'm not recommending 10. I'm just saying that's what it
I
is.
think these are different zones, Paul, than the PBs.
Right.
So you could do that. You could have the SERHO and the PB, all of them with no minimum district size. And then for PVRA and other,
5.
I mean, that's what we originally had. That was.
I think that makes
And
sense.
5 would be probably 2 or 3 buildable.
Right.
Doesn't, may not,
Right.
may only be a half an acre. buildable. It
Yeah.
really
I could go with
depends.
5.
Yeah, 5's
Okay.
good.
I go
Are
with
you, want
5.
me to?
Baron, you like 5?
so in the
With the word.
PVRA,
Okay.
Yeah.
Craig, you
5.
like 5? You like the number 5?
No, PVRA 5.
It's all the
and other
fingers on
5.
one hand.
I'm looking.
Won't debate.
So we're agreeing that we're
Okay.
changing this table under section 4.
So we'll put the minimum district size back in and
This-
then we'll put that in
This
there.
poor table has taken such a battering over the last 2 months. It's had nips and tucks.
It's
I
strong,
guess so. It's going like this and this and this and this.
What about density? Let's think about density on this 2 or 3 buildable acres.
And so I do, so to Jennifer's point previously, for talking about the public and perception, one of the things that happens, and you'll see it in neighboring communities, some of which I work in, is when people don't like an application that the regs allow, they are very, it catches them off guard, and there's almost offended that someone would come in and ask for some application that's so dense or so tall or in this place. And it really creates this adverse reaction, and they get very galvanized around that. And so one of the things that I have some concern about, if you take away the density, is someone could come in with a crazy development, and once that word spreads, I think this regulation can fail, because what's going to happen is people are going to immediately think it's incorrect. They're not going to like it. In one of the towns that I was in, a member of the public submitted a regulation amendment and tried to undo the whole thing, because they were so upset by the idea that such a development could even be possible, that they just couldn't stand the thought and they needed the regulation to go away. So I think setting those caps, and if you don't like where they are, push them up, but
Yeah,
at least
well,
creates a ceiling.
particularly 5 units. I mean,
For the other,
yeah, I mean, the other could have water and sewer. I mean,
Yeah, but you had a whole plan of conservation and development where people told you where they thought compact, more dense development was
Yeah.
appropriate.
and so
And now you're going against
But
that.
that's there. In fact, you got.
we added that based upon the last meeting, which, so now it's arterial collector
Yeah, I see
and
it.
The compact and you
on
got 5.
compact residential.
You know where we could get away with anything we wanted practically is in the already developed aging housing sections like Redwood or I don't know all the names of them, but
Mhm.
all of those, if they could be bought up by somebody, that's the place to do all of this.
And right now they're in others.
Yeah.
They're in the RAR 90, most of
And
them.
that, you get away with it there.
Are they on an arterial collector and in
Yeah.
compact residential land use?
Well,
Yep,
Future,
I have to look.
Your compact-
Maybe not Renwood, but
Where's Renwood?
that future compact,
195.
future compact residential is not a lot of space, actually. It's not, there's not a lot of that
Which
in
one is Renwood?
town,
Renwood's on 195 and Baxter.
if you look at the GIS map. So it's this language further constrains what it used to say, which was just arterial collector. And then we had some, the siting criteria, but adding that compact residential on the future land use map will reduce it further. There's not a ton of that.
Right, but I'm asking, why is that 5?
5 units per developable acre, because when we establish the other category for what those other zones would be, we just use a number that wouldn't basically would create a distinction between the other zones. I mean, when you look at 5 units per acre versus the 8, 10, and 15, it's
Yeah.
just,
But I think the 8 and 15 are too low already, so that the 5 seems to be way below what it should be, especially if it's in an area where the land use is compact residential, it's on an arterial road, it has water and sewer. 5, shouldn't limit it to 5.
and we're already
Can you pull
limiting it
up
to
the
multiplex.
future land use map.
Oh, right. Yeah.
This is only for multiplex.
So single family detached duplex gets 10 an acre.
Right.
Actually, we had 10 or an earlier.
It's
version.
still 10 for single family detached and duplex. On their other
Okay.
10 units per developable acre and on arterial and collector roads. When we added the multiplex to other, it was reduced to 5 units, and we added the compact residential land use map as another identifying location criteria. So there's kind of 2 categories in the
But adding
other.
the multiplex is, we should get more dense, not less dense.
Well, you want to limit I think the idea was, as you branch out into other areas, you want to limit the total number of
The
units.
multiplex is one building that has 3 to 6 dwelling units.
So I used the one that was on the GIS.
Yeah.
Maybe that.
Oh,
was-
we have it.
Why,
We have it
why
on the
so
gym?
few?
Yeah, you have one in GIS.
Actually.
It's under land
That
use.
Potentially has water and sewer and is identified as a place where we want to develop.
Water and sewer isn't one of the citing criteria yet.
No, we have
So-
eliminated that as, so that's up to them. So
Yeah,
don't worry about that. It could, it might have water and
And they
sewer.
should have, yeah, thank you.
And it might be identified as a
Takes
place
a
we want to
while.
develop.
I think in my mind, because these are gonna be more, and we can adjust it because now we've added the compact residential requirement, which he's gonna bring up, but because these are gonna be more widespread and could be kind of in areas that are here or there, just wanting to limit that total size. So,
Future land use is an incredibly uncompressed map, so it takes a while to load up, but this is our future land use map.
It's one unit under the multiplex, one building, is that how?
We really gotta
it's
compress
measured?
this.
Right, but the multiplex is 3 to 5, so 3 to 6 units
I
per building.
So it's the areas
could
in
be.
brown. It's the areas in
Areas in
brown.
brown are compact
I think so.
residential, that's dark brown. Areas in the light brown are compact residential transitional. Mixed use center is the red and orange stripes. And then the transition from that is the light brown and orange stripes.
yeah, so it'd just be those two different brown colors.
Mhm.
Is that middle brown on the left, is that Eagleville area?
The middle brown, do you refer to this?
No, I mean, the dark brown in the middle. Where is that
This is
exactly?
That's
Hunting Lodge.
No,
Um,
down
No.
south. Yeah, that is Eagleville. It is the senior center, Wrights Village area,
Oh, there.
And that's where we had a proposed, what was that?
right?
So this
Proposed
is
Oh, I'm looking at it.
Knollwood
I'm looking at it the right way.
and the current development.
Got it.
Right. I think that in the other,
See, that whole brown area, I could see that as being 20, not 5.
You see that what, Paul?
That's being 20, you know, because.
I don't, I think people are
The one that
gonna,
we just developed was 20 there,
yeah, but,
The one we just developed.
on South Eagleville. So,
But I
People-
think that's more dense than people.
People do
so this is,
call our office to ask questions
This
about
is-
how big
this
it is, not as much as
this is
the
20 here.
other ones.
Can you flip on an area?
I can flip on an aerial, so.
What was the name of the company that wanted to look at this before?
Masonic care.
Masonic Care, do we
They
want
own
to
it.
limit Masonic Care to 5 units? They
Um,
want to come back?
That's not, well, what do they want to do? You're talking like assisted living? or-
It'd be up to
Right.
100.
That would be, I think, a different type of use.
yeah,
That wouldn't be resident,
We'd land a different zone on.
Well, I think that would be like a nursing home or a continuing care
Assisted living,
retirement.
yeah.
it's a graduated thing that they
Yeah.
wanna do.
Continuing care.
That would
retirement.
fall under this regulation.
So I have a thought, the 10 acres per developer unit, whatever, under this other area, I feel like we should, tie it to the future land use map under the other categories, not just for the multiplex.
So even for the single family, detached and the duplexes. Those are the two
Single family detached,
detached or duplex units.
okay,
So that's the. basic
So
policy.
tiny houses. That was the idea, right? The cottage cluster.
okay. Okay,
So if you wanted like a Concord Riverwalk type thing, with a little single family detached.
yeah, okay,
So we split it out just to make that a little bit easier to do.
okay, I see where you're going with that now. I also had a question about a duplex. Why does a duplex have to be side by side and not like one over one?
I put that in there because if it's one on top of the other, the top unit, number one, isn't accessible, and number two, they don't have direct access to the outside. So they'd be stuck on a deck or a porch, they wouldn't be able to come in or out. And when we talked about like amenities and outdoor space and all these other things, having direct access at ground level, to me, really contributes to that. Rather than trying to move your bed and everything else that you're trying to do up a staircase, you're not gonna have.
That's like, my daughter's looking for a place in New Haven and that's all you have. Or, like,
Right there.
yeah, they're stacked.
It's a more efficient use of land,
It is.
double deckers, triple deckers.
Hmm,
Yeah, I mean, we could take the restriction out for a duplex, but I think with that you're gonna have these inconsistencies with the units, because you're gonna have one ground floor unit that'll probably have a deck or a patio and a slide door that's giving them light and ventilation, and the second floor is gonna have none of it. And, you know, there'll be differences, I would imagine, in what those rent for, et cetera. Obviously, that's how everybody built things going back. Everybody's lived in a second or third floor. It's
I mean-
hot and everything else, but
Like the row houses for the.
yeah, so
Like go to Willimantic, I mean, that's what they
Yeah.
have there
Mhm.
now. Mhm. I mean, it's just something it was a
So
question.
is there some way we can make this density more flexible?
just set it up higher and then don't issue it out at the ceiling each time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you have
because we have discretion. over
You
it.
have discretion, it's maximum density, so if somebody comes in with a design based on whatever you set that maximum ceiling at. And you guys think it's too much for the site, you can say, no, we want you to reduce the density by X.
I think. I think the density for the other, given the feedback that I'm hearing from just out through this Northwest plan, I think. I think that's about right for now. You
Five?
can always go up, you can't go down.
Yeah, you
They
can't,
want
can't
five.
make them
Really,
take units out
You
once they
can't,
build it.
yeah, you
It's too
can't,
big.
you can't,
They want 5 on a place.
well,
with
I don't
water
know
and
what they
sewer.
want, but I think that right now we're at 8. Like for the DMR, isn't it? The DMR.
DMR we
8?
got rid of, remember?
But
Yeah.
before,
was-
like,
Oh,
if
yeah,
there was,
Yes.
before,
I
yes,
think it was 8, yeah. So we're going, I mean, we could keep them at 8, but I think having, I don't know, I think increasing the density may sink this, but that's,
I feel like that has been problematic. I think,
Yeah.
I think that has been what's caused problems.
But what's
for
the
us.
density at standard? It's like 100, right?
Very.
no, it's,
What is, yeah,
it's not, but.
But I know that density has been a problem, but I've also heard from folks that density is more energy efficient. Density, there are arguments to density.
well, there are, but I'm
Um,
not sure that,
I mean, the strongest arguments we hear are against density, but there have been people in focus groups and things that we've done for the Northwest Mansfield plan that have definitely talked about the upside of density. So,
All right.
So I think people want, in our next iteration of development, they want density to be less than the standard.
absolutely.
Okay, so so
We
my
have to-
question is, what is the standard?
I'm looking,
Standard is with the lots merged is 27 acres.
but
give or
it's,
take.
Okay,
It's
so
also in the presentation.
it's in the presentation that,
7 acres and 500 units.
I have the presentation, but I'm,
Well, more than 500.
How many buildable acres are there? Because that's what we're
There's a
looking at,
lot
right?
of them.
Yeah.
Let's just wait for them. Just come on, I can't recall off the top of my head. Really see how it's coming along.
Which one were,
The standard.
the standard is 16 units an acre.
but
Okay,
the
that's
one of the
interesting.
things, that is different, okay. So what's interesting about these new developments, 16 units an acre, is that it's, how much is it per developable acre? Because that's, I think, what people see, like they're, with the standard, they had very little wetland impacts, and that was a redevelopment, but as a result, they put everything right on.
Is it 16 per developable?
I
16.
actually went back and calculated that.
27
It would have to be, because your multifamily now requires it per developable acre. We've
Yeah,
pulled
it
over
has
the
to be.
same thing.
You're right.
So it's identical. Yes, yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
So if standard is 16 and we don't want that, how about we go back to the 8? And we can sell that as being half the density of the standard.
So you're going back to 8 in the PV zones. You're
I don't
well,
want to go below 8 anyplace.
okay, well then, so now we're going,
So multiplex 8 units per developable acre, is that what we're saying
Yeah.
For other.
for other?
And if anyone asks, they can say that's half the density of standard.
And so I just want to jump back because obviously you guys are on a time constraint with your moratorium coming to an end. So I want to make sure that as we go through, we know what changes we're making. So you have an updated draft and you can refer out duplexes. Do you want us to remove side by side?
Yeah,
So that it would allow the up and down.
Is there a way that we could add so that they have access to shared outdoor space?
Think,
That's already in like your sort of design.
That's what I thought.
standards.
They have
So
access
so
to,
that-
yeah, I think,
we can take out the side by side, could just say a residential building consisting of 2 unassociated dwelling units constructed with separate entrances, because I think you still want.
Yeah, yeah,
restrictions,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
We could just do that.
Yep.
Does that work?
Mhm.
I
Okay,
grew up in a duplex up and down.
yes,
People upstairs use the yard, we use the yard.
right, and then we'll change the multiplex maximum density to 8 units per developable acre.
Taking
And-
note of the fact that that's half of the standard.
and we want to leave in the compact residential future on the future land use map. Want to leave that in as a citing criteria for the other developments, right? Consensus would appear yes, because we're gonna not add the requirement for water and sewer.
Although that does reduce the, where you can
Yes,
Right.
develop to.
Also, remember, you're about to redo your POCD and you have control over what that map says.
and
Right.
it will, and Northwest Mansfield is coming in with some changes. as well.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
okay.
Well, that was easy.
So, I want to touch on a couple of other things that we changed that are notable. So we did change, and add a line to the calculation of developable area. And this was really trying to get to some questions that staff had had. So we've added in, so it's currently says that the following areas must be excluded from the total acreage calculation. We added total acreage of land currently or planned to be set aside for non-residential development. And so the idea with that is if you had a site that was already developed, that was partially developed, or they had an intent to do some other type of project there, if they wanted to do commercial or something else, they would exclude that from the area when they're determining what their density is. We wouldn't want someone to sort of double count the developable acreage on a parcel. So if you have someone that wanted to co-locate a commercial site or do some type of redevelopment, was a large parcel, this area that had already been developed or that was part of a separate application, because remember, this is not for a commercial use, this is for housing. That area comes out from contributing to a lot. They can't use that area to pump up their density. So
Unless they split it.
right, if they split it, then it's off the table, but they would be stuck with the developable acreage on this site for this project and still have to meet all the zoning regs for the commercial project for siting and
This
coverage.
still
and-
allows the flexibility to have the mixed use without them having to subdivide. But not take what's gonna be just developed for commercial into consideration so that they can get more residential units.
So if they use the whole parcel to get their residential densities, but they stick it in a corner, they can't come back a year later and say, well, now we want to do a Dollar General. Because they've already used that area for their density. But if they exclude it and they come to you and say, listen, we'd love to build like a gym here or a medical office as, you know, or some other amenity for these people, then they're gonna just exclude that from the master plan.
Right.
And they'll come back to you under a traditional zoning application.
I wonder about the mixed use in these developments. I don't see them being terribly successful in downtown centers, so I don't know why they would be more successful in these new developments. I don't know why we get fixated on mixed use.
Well, I think, I think like, for example, the standard, you're gonna have a lot of people living there. And a lot of people who are gonna be wanting services and a lot of people who we want to have services right there where they're at. And I think that, and I think,
That's what will make them successful is the residents.
absolutely, what is it, rooftop makes
Yeah.
retailer, whatever that planning expression is, but, so, yeah, I think that it is good to have services. I mean, you know, having.
I just wondered the success of them and why we, what.
Well, the
Well-
difference with this is we are setting this up to allow for separate commercial uses in separate buildings.
Oh, okay.
Right,
The mixed use in the same building is really hard from a code and a finance and an insurance perspective.
Right,
it's
okay.
getting much trickier.
It's not
with banking
coincident
now,
that
yeah.
a Starbucks got approved in the Big Y Plaza in Tallinn right after the Santini project was approved. Right, because they're gonna have 250 units there when it's done, right across the street, and that's right in the clientele that Santini likes to rent to. So that didn't just happen, right? Like, oh, we'll just, it was all very much part of what made that pad site, which has been approved since the Big Y was built, viable. So we're moving this outside of it because the residential mixed use that's over there is very hard to do now because of the inherent conflict.
And as part of the repeal section, we actually took out the verbiage that says you have to have commercial on the first floor and residential above. And we opened it up to say you can have mixed uses on the same site, because a lot of developers are looking for that. I had one in one of my towns, they had the up and down, the retail on the first floor and office space and residential, and they couldn't get financing for it, so it's all residential
What, do you
now.
know why that is?
The banks are being much more strict. I don't know what bank they were using.
Yeah.
They ran into other complications too. They
They're
had to,
looking at all the ones that have failed, that's what.
they had to, yeah, it's possible. So they took that component out, of their project, but
And retail didn't do well during COVID.
right,
Now it's starting to come back. You can see
Right.
store centers starting to fill.
Yeah.
up.
The other thing that, I mean, we just did a text amendment for the city of Hartford, and the projects in and around Duncan Park are having a hard time with commercial ground floor. What they want is the ability to provide ground floor tenant amenities. They want to provide a gym, they want to provide a co-working space, they want to provide coffee shop, they want to provide a bowling alley. And that stuff happens on the ground floor. And so if they have to allocate that to commercial, they can't provide the amenities that the residents want. And so they're to the point, you know, the city basically said, this is what we're willing to shift this to. Ground floor tenant amenities can consist of X. They require bike storage and other things. And then there's a portion that they're gonna have to just keep commercial, and they're gonna just eat it. They're likely never gonna get a tenant. They're not gonna build it out, and that'll just be money that they factor in as a loss as part of the cost of the project.
One of the things we thought about way back when we were doing our multifamily regulations was to have it designed so that it could be converted to ground floor retail, or so for now, co-working gyms, bowling alleys, whatever might work, but then, because it's harder to go back and retrofit that higher level ground floor, right? So is that something?
The ceiling height,
Yeah, and also there's different code
yeah.
things that you have to think about.
yeah, I mean, it's depending on what their design is, and when they come in, I think that's a conversation you can have, but I think opening up the possibility for them to come in and have mixed use designed on a site without having residential above your commercial makes it a little bit more feasible for them,
Mhm.
from a design perspective, for how they lay out their site. Also makes it easier for you guys to say, we'd rather see, you know, a commercial up front and your larger residential buildings to the back, or whatever the case may be. So it provides a little bit more flexibility, from that design perspective as well.
Jen, I'm sorry, I have to leave for another meeting. But it's been interesting.
You were here for the most important part.
I hope so.
Is there any other major ones?
We added, well, this was previous, but still shown as a red line. We added the 25 units or more for the requirement of a traffic study. We also removed the fiscal impact analysis language from your DAC.
Thank you.
In accordance with
Can I ask one thing about the traffic study?
Yeah.
Is what 25 units, what's the sweet spot for that? Like what's the reasoning for 25 units and not something else?
I don't think there's a bright line between any of it, because traffic studies, well, 25 units to me, particularly when you're looking across the board, because some of these, based on where they're located and what the tenants are 25 units with something that's more of elderly or age restricted versus something that has access to, walking, you're gonna see less vehicles. It was just a starting point. Your subdivision regulations have pretty strong language, and that's for a residential development. The number of trips per day on a single family home are gonna be way higher than an apartment. So it was just kind of with those in mind. I don't, not a traffic expert, so it's not based in other than what your current standards are.
And back to the trick, because this is something we've talked about in the Northwest plan is that, and in our current regulations, it's a little bit vague as to what the scope of a traffic, I couldn't find anything. Maybe
So-
the scope of the traffic study, but you guys kind of delineate what should be in the traffic study.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so can you just talk, because when we explain this to the public, that's gonna be a really important thing to explain, and I think what you did is good. But I think knowing like how you came up with that is, I would like to know that so that I
I
can.
think it's just, I mean, I don't know, it's standard, pretty standard language for what you would come up with in a
Okay.
traffic study.
All right,
I don't know what your verbiage is now.
And I think. the
it's by a
key-
certified professional it's very, pretty vague, I think.
Yeah, but I think, and
Okay.
we did make that change to basically saying that this information shall be prepared and certified by the appropriate licensed professional.
Right.
Rather than just
Right.
trying to list out a whole bunch, but,
Right.
making sure that they use the right class of development to generate their trips per day.
Yep.
And making sure that they evaluate the intersections, and with some of these things, if it's like a light, they're gonna, it's not completely arbitrary as to whether or not that intersection will begin to fail. If the level of service will decrease. And there was an adjacent community that we just did some reg changes for. And they had in there that if you had a traffic signal that decreased by a certain amount in its level of service, or to a certain level of service, that the development would be required for increases. And they took that out because there's inherent issues with requiring people to just upgrade traffic signals when they may be adding.
DOT.
You don't have permission. to
Right,
do that.
DOT.
Well, if it fails beyond a certain level of service, like
Right.
you don't want to just say, okay, we'll approve this and this
But
traffic
that's
signal
what
will go to an
the
F.
state wouldn't let them do that anyway.
Yeah, and I think it was, I don't know if they even have any of that, but with local, like wanting to do all that engineering and making all those improvements, you don't necessarily want to require that each time.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, we put in the present anticipated traffic counts, volumes, flow patterns, capacity analysis of present and proposed interchanges, intersections, entrances, exits serving the development. So we tried to encompass all the things that you would want to see. And then we added in at the end, because traffic reports can be pretty cumbersome to read, that they have to give a narrative summary of the traffic.
I saw
report.
that and I really liked that, yeah.
To put it in layman's terms so that everybody understands what you're talking about.
And we could change it to say it may be required. The problem with that is if they show up with a master plan, and then you decide it's required, then they have to do the traffic study and now.
No, I think, I hear about traffic all the time, and the thing I hear about is the cumulative impacts.
Mhm.
We hear that all the time, like
Yeah,
the and I don't know how, we
But I think
can't,
one thing that
You
people
can't,
don't
yeah.
realize is that if you have a walkable neighborhood with some businesses in it and a bus that goes to Yukon, traffic could paradoxically decrease. I mean, everyone assumes that, and another person moving to Mansfield means the traffic gets worse, but it may be the opposite.
I mean, the more walkable of a neighborhood you are, more walkable to amenities you are, then yeah, people are gonna use their bikes, so they're gonna walk, and you're not gonna have the traffic impact other than if they're leaving to go to work or other things.
The other thing, so this is from the ITE trip generation manual that traffic engineers use. This is the 10th edition. I think they're on the 11th now. But a single family detached housing, they are saying generates 99 or just under one trip per unit when they're looking at whatever I think this is for PM peak. And low rise multifamily is 0.56, so half of that. Mid rise goes down even to lower than that, between 0.4 and 0.1. And high rise multifamily goes from 0.6 to 0.19. So approving multifamily housing, the data shows will decrease traffic
Yeah.
because they just take fewer trips. There's not
But
one.
people say, the traffic is already bad, so
Right.
don't build anything else.
Everybody
Right.
says that.
Yeah.
Because of them.
Everywhere, yes,
And,
yeah.
you know,
I'm sure that data normalized across all development
That's what I'm gonna
patterns.
say in the
Because
next
it seems to
meeting.
be like high rise mostly happens in cities where you have a certain density.
We're just gonna get us to
Require certain
Yeah,
bonuses to walking.
so
So
like
that's
a
the-
mid-rise multifamily in a general urban suburban community is
We're
0.4.
being hyped.
In a dense multi-use urban is 0.1.
Okay, so it does break that down.
Okay.
So you have
That's
to
good.
take that into context.
Right,
but-
but no, but it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's a pattern that holds true across development
Correct.
patterns,
Yes.
which is,
That's interesting.
that's actually, that is the thing we have to be.
But there's nothing, the only thing that even comes close to single family is a residential planned unit development. And that's 0.6. There's nothing that even comes close to the traffic that a single family home. With our 5 bedrooms and our 4 vehicles and our Sunday car and our mom that's visiting and all the things that we have.
Yeah.
The data,
You've got a Sunday car?
I certainly
Good for
do.
you.
I certainly do not,
And a camper.
but yeah.
All right,
So that's all the big points for,
Good, I think we're ready to go.
so I have,
Ready for prime time.
I have 2 things.
Yes.
The affordable housing regulations, so we're going with.
we're just getting rid of the fee and lieu. We'll get,
Okay.
that's in the repeal one. We'll switch over to that, but for PhDD, is there any other?
It'll be 15%,
I have-
right?
Right, so, but I have I just want to talk about the density of these other developments, because I finally found how I calculated it. So I took the total acres for Eagleville Green, the density is actually 12.7. For the standard, it's 25.9. For the villages, it's 14. For Middle Turnpike, it's 8.6. And for King Hill, it's 159. So they're actually, in some cases, they're higher, like at the SCRO, you're allowing more units, but, so
Okay.
just an FYI.
So I have to go, but Robin can stay. The only thing that we'll need to clarify is to keep on the schedule. I think what we'll need to do is make these changes, send them to you for review and then refer. Because I don't think we have time to do another meeting.
No,
So we'll do that. We just need to know what the date to have that, to what that timeline is. You don't need to tell me now. I just want to make sure.
I think it's like, tomorrow.
Pretty much.
Does-
Can you send me your notes, or are they in the shared file?
I will.
Okay.
I was informed that I'm needed for.
We've got
quorum,
45
so
more
that's
minutes.
why I'm-
Oh, that's fine. You're fine.
Does the body need a vote to adopt these as with?
We're not you're not
No,
adopting.
to adopt these as a thing to send to the main body?
I think there's a consensus here.
I don't think so. I just,
No, I mean,
I don't think it's necessary.
You guys are kind of
Yeah, we'll
advisory,
see
but
the
yeah, but you're in,
full
in consent, for the record, you're in consensus that this should go to the
Yeah.
full planning and zoning
Yeah.
commission for referral. Okay,
all right, so we'll make those changes. I'll get them over to you tomorrow.
thank you.
So we can adjourn the meeting.
No,
No, not
Okay.
quite
That's
yet.
something else.
Just, yeah, so the zoning regulations sections for repeal, I just wanna quickly go through. So we took DMR out, the zoning district.
Mhm.
So that came out of your residential use table. As we discussed, and then if you go down, anything that was referenced to it also got redlined. Under that same section for multifamily dwellings, in accordance with, and you currently obviously refer to your current multifamily dwelling section. That's gonna be replaced with whatever the number ends up being for the planned housing development district, so that all got redlined out. The use is permitted in the SDRHO zone, again, took out the multifamily dwellings and put in the language for the planned housing development district. Just for consistency, obviously, all through. We're going to repeal in its entirety, section 190-25, which is your provisions for multifamily and group dwelling developments. We're tagging to come back to you guys about the group dwelling developments.
The PB, ones that are allowed only in PB4 and the I
Right.
zones.
Mainly because when I redlined this section and the group dwelling language was left, it really doesn't work. So I think there's a little bit work to be done, but Jennifer and I talked, and you don't have anything sort of up and coming for it, so we have time just to repeal it and then come back and talk about it. The PVRA, all of the provisions that protect those farm soils are staying in place. The only sections getting changed are going again to refer over to this PHDD for multifamily and taking out the bulk and area requirements that were in there so that you can use this master plan development.
And the huge setbacks are taken away.
Yes, the
Good.
huge setbacks are being taken away, yes.
And PVCA is falling under other, correct?
Yeah, PVCA is not, it's not a residential
Right,
use.
so I didn't
Oh,
look at the
okay.
PVCA. The fee in lieu of calculation, we're wiping that in its entirety based on our conversation.
Mhm.
So that will come out and I'll send you over an updated version of this, because this one we had just changed the percentage. I'll go back and just redline the whole section. So that's it for the repealing of the sections that are relevant to this. And then the very last one was section 190-35, which is your non-residential uses. We added this master plan, the PHDD for all of the PB zones. So PB1 through PB5, it will be allowed in, and we just added that in as a allowable use. So those are the changes that are relevant to doing this PHDD.
Great.
Good.
I have one, just our affordable housing reg right now is, I think we should keep everything as is, but we're, doing what we said. However, in the while we're doing this, in the introductory section, it talks a lot about things that I don't think should be in a regulation. Like it refers back to the 2015 Mansfield Tomorrow POCD. It talks
Okay.
about, would this be an appropriate time to just get rid of that
If
stuff?
there's something you want to redline, you can just send it over.
Okay.
I'll add it in to
All
that
right.
document.
Yeah, it's because it's,
Yeah,
all right, so. Great, I think we need to talk a little bit about schedule because as I'm talking with you, we tentatively wanted to have a public hearing, open the public hearing on June 17th. That means we have to go to all of our committees. We've really, there's been a lot of public interest in these regulations. I don't want to rush it, but at the same time, I don't want to do this during the summer. So I think we're trying to find this balance. So your last meeting in June is on the 17th. And then you don't have a meeting until July 15th. So you're not even gonna have 20 days between the time you have, 30 days between the time you have your last meeting in June, just because of the way things are falling.
Before the moratorium ends.
Well, no, I'm talking about just having, when you are gonna have your public hearing.
Oh, public hearing.
Yeah, because you've got a meeting on the 3rd of June and then you have a meeting on the 17th of June. But that means you've got to go to like the Conservation Commission, we have to have a special, the Design Committee, all these committees have to have the opportunity to weigh in. I think we owe
Yeah.
that to them.
Yeah.
So
Can we have this done after the moratorium ends? By a week or a month? Does it have to be done on the last day of August?
well, I can
but-
make a suggestion.
yeah,
My creative thinking over here as I'm listening. What if you do the repeals before the moratorium ends? It's gonna completely come out.
Right, so they
And
can't do anything.
They can't
They're
do
stuck.
anything, and they're stuck, and then you're coming in with the PHDD right after it.
Because multifamily comes out.
It comes out in its entirety.
that's great.
Good idea.
Okay, so
That's what I'm here for.
that's great.
Yeah, that's a time or two.
Time or two.
So then if we complete it on September 20th, it doesn't matter. Right, so we can.
I mean,
doesn't have to be
theoretically,
August
yes,
31st.
you're right. You'll move it along, so if you have that second meeting in July, so I would do June 17th, when does the moratorium end?
The 31st
Of
of August.
Oh, okay, so we still have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So you could still do what I'm suggesting. So then why don't you said July 15th?
So we have June 17th or July 15th. July 15th ends up being in the summer and we get a lot of feedback. that
Okay.
That's not okay to have.
So why don't you schedule a public hearing to do the repeal document on June 17th?
Can we do?
And then,
Yeah, we can do
and
that.
then the other one could
We
be
have to
done
go
in
back.
September.
We do have to refer that out, but we'll do that tomorrow, as long as
We
we,
don't have to go to all the committees with that?
30 days.
You're just repealing.
yeah, we can refer it. I mean, to them, I'm not gonna go, if they wanna weigh in, that's fine, but I'm not gonna go and give a
And then we could
presentation to
have the
them.
public hearing for the new ones in September.
If that's,
Well, okay,
There
so what we
may
could do,
be, based on comments made by certain members of the PZC who are not here today, substantial opposition on principle to striking something without affirmation that something will be confirmed.
Right.
We could
And
put a note asterisk saying,
we could have the PhDD approved, but not just have it effective before the moratorium expires, correct? That's what we were trying to do. We were trying to have the public hearing, have it close, and then have that statutory required effective date before the moratorium expired. But we could potentially at least have the PhDD approved by August 31st and then have it take effect
September
September
15th.
something.
but yeah, that means you can't wait till September to
Do
have
the
your
public
public
hearing.
hearing, right?
But I mean, we could. I mean,
We could have it in August
we could have it
26th.
August 5th. We could start it on August 5th and continue it to August 19th. No,
Well, we could actually schedule the public hearing for June 17th. But still allow so before everyone
You
goes on
can
vacation,
start, yes,
and then we just keep continuing things.
Yeah.
We take extra time over the summer, get comments, people can come meet with us.
you guys aren't bound by the
timeframes.
timeframes, so you absolutely can open the public hearing in June.
Right.
Start getting comments back in. And keep it open until you're comfortable that you've collected all the comments from whomever.
Yep, and then continue that public hearing, close that public hearing in,
Close it in August.
in August.
well, actually, we could close it in September. Because we could just keep that open and then so that we'll have one more chance for people to weigh in on.
All I would say is if you're gonna close it after your moratorium ends, just know if you have a developer sitting out there waiting for your moratorium to
No,
end.
we will have repealed multifamily.
Oh, so you're still talking repealing first and then,
Yeah,
oh, that's fine.
I think we
Yes.
repealed by July, by
Yes,
whatever, before the moratorium's over.
so you'll set those as separate items on the agenda then?
Correct.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
fine.
So
Yeah,
do we have, let's.
Do you need a
does that
public
make-
hearing to repeal?
yes.
Yeah, it says
Okay.
unchanged.
Yeah.
So. Does that sound good to everyone? Because we can,
Yeah,
I'll talk about the details.
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
And what we need, because we're
That's
gonna need
fine.
something
Yep.
tomorrow to send out to the cops.
Yep.
Does that make sense? I like.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little bit, because I was feeling
A
really
little time
rushed
crunch?
and feeling that people weren't gonna get the opportunity to.
now, not everyone is gonna be completely happy.
No,
no, that's,
but they do deserve the chance to weigh in.
yeah. Okay, that works.
We believe in Jeremy Bentham, greatest good for the greatest number.
There's an awful lot of problems with utilitarianism. Breaks down, so.
So I'll make the changes to the PhDD and to the sections to be removed. If you can send me whatever it is that you want removed from the affordable housing, we'll put that in there. And then you'll have those to refer.
Great, that's perfect. I'll do
Okay.
that first thing tomorrow. Does it
Sounds
okay
good.
for the housing?
What is the infill?
That comes
That comes next.
Okay.
We can't-
That's not related.
That's what we did.
I thought so, it's just checking.
All doesn't get discussed as fun toy. and-
Craig, you've been very quiet.
Yes, isn't that nice for a change?
We miss you.
I'll make it in person next time.
Okay.
Great. We are adjourned at 6:15. Thank you.